Hello and welcome to Grody and Unprofessional. My name is Justin McMenamy, and my mission is to share both profitable and painful leadership lessons I have acquired over a 20-year career as a misfit in corporate America. In this episode, I sit down with a friend and fellow corporate misfit. As an employee, he was never able to snag those top performance ratings. But in my book, this episode exceeds expectations. Steve Pierz, my good friend, it is so good to have you today in studio for Grody and Unprofessional.
My pleasure to be here.
This is an interview that I have been looking forward to for a long time. I've known you for a couple years, and you are a very interesting person to know. And every time I sit down with you, I'm always challenged. I'm always made a little bit uncomfortable in my mindsets. And so I'm excited for my friends and audience to hear and get to meet you today.
I'm really surprised you invited me.
Well, this is not live. So as a friend of mine who does video editing says, after we're done here, I can pretty much make you say whatever I want.
Nice. The power of the computer instead of the power of the pen.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So a kickoff question here. You and I worked at the same company for a long time. We actually didn't know each other while we were both working at the same company, something like 60, 80,000 employees. We never bumped into each other. But I've heard a story before that you had a certain strategy that you would use heading into large, important meetings that maybe would fall under the category of grody and unprofessional. How about you share with me about that story?
I'd love to, because it's one of those things that in a large corporation, everyone has their set routines. So I would go to a division meeting with all the managers and so on. I'd get there early, and I'd find out where the division manager sat. And I would purposely sit in that seat. And the looks I would get were just off the wall. Then I'd take an orange or a grapefruit out. I'd peel it. And this is as the meeting started, as we start to talk about the overview, innovation, strategy, whatever it was. And I'd peel the orange, and I'd set the orange aside and just start to eat the peel. The peel of a grapefruit is not good, but it sends an amazing message to the entire group. This is not going to be a typical meeting.
What was the message you were hoping to send? Were you just hoping to get everybody out of their rut?
Exactly. You have to have some sort of a shock to get people to think differently, especially when they're in their home turf, they're in their house, they're thinking the way they normally think, they're thinking the way they think the division manager wants them to think. And unless you can knock them off their zone and get them out of it, you're going to get the same old results. Yeah. And it was very, very effective.
How committed to the act were you? Did you swallow all the way down?
Yeah, the whole grapefruit peel.
You ate the whole peel?
The whole thing, and got up and threw away the grapefruit in front of everyone.
I commend you, my friend. Did you take the sticker down also? Did you swallow the sticker?
I won't say, but probably yes.
Okay. Let's rewind the clock a little bit. You chose mechanical engineering as your discipline. Take me back to young Steve Pierz. What was it about mechanical engineering, or engineering specifically, that drew you to that as you sought to set what your career in life would look like?
I had an amazing upbringing. My dad was an engineer. My mom was a teacher. We lived in Ireland for a couple of years. My dad was setting up a die casting factory there. Our bedroom looked out onto the shop floor. My dad was an innovator, creator, many patents on die casting and so on. So just watching my dad work. Then we moved to Canada for 2 years. Same thing. Greenfield, he builds a building, sets up all the equipment. We used to drive around forklifts the way people drove mini bikes. That was my playground. That was everything that I loved, because my dad's passion for creativity, my mom was also very creative.
Yeah.
And so My dad was an engineer. My oldest brother's an engineer. My middle brother's an engineer. I'm an engineer. My mom was a teacher. My sisters are teachers.
Okay. So it was cast in the genes.
It was cast in the genes.
Coming out of school, what role did you start your career in?
I worked for a heat treat company called Burgess Norton on the west suburbs of Chicago, Geneva. My job was to come up with the recipe to carburize the piston pin for everything from small little Lycoming engines to massive locomotives. And after about 3 months, it's like I'm doing the same thing over and over. So I wrote a basic program that essentially did my job. I bulletproofed it for 3 more months where I just let the program do my job. And then after that, I went to my boss. I said, here's my job on a 3.5 by 5 inch disc.
Right.
And showed him how to use it and quit.
Wow. I think it's a good lesson, and I think it's one that anybody starting out their career is good to hear, is that first job isn't a 30-year commitment.
Nope.
That first job, you're learning who you are and what you're gifted at and what you're skilled in, and learning how that interacts with various companies, various managers, various roles, various environments. And I think informed guess and check is a very good method to look at not just your career, but other aspects of life as well. A couple years into your career, you went back to school and got an MBA. And I'm interested also in your thought process in that exercise, as well as the proverbial question that everybody's wondering, was it worth it? So
great question. I love it. My wife and I are both engineers. We both graduated together. She was number 1 in the class. I was a few down from there. We worked amongst engineers at CAT, and it's like, we love to learn. Let's go on for our MBA. That way we could have kind of a little business background. So we signed up for it and started first class.
Yeah.
What's your name? Where do you work? And what do you do? Caterpillar, engineer, Caterpillar, engineer, Caterpillar, engineer. We almost quit the first day.
Okay.
Because we wanted to meet people outside the engineering.
Yeah.
And it seems like all Caterpillar engineers go on to get their MBAs.
Yeah.
And it's a smart strategy, because if you don't speak the language of business, if you're just pure engineering, you're never going to get your project sold.
Yeah.
You have to know the numbers. You have to speak their language, because they're in control. And nothing's going to get done without that. So we gutted through it. One of my favorite stories, I couldn't beat her to save my soul. She is wickedly brilliant. So every test we've taken, she'd get a higher A than I'd get. The prof only gave 1 A. She'd get the A, I'd get the highest B. And this is bachelor's and master's. She's kicking
all the way
butt,
through.
All the way through. And same with the MBA. She got outstanding MBA. But she gave birth to our second son on Saturday. We were supposed to have a test on Monday, and that's when CAT only gave you 3 days in the hospital.
Yeah.
So we took the test with a 5-day-old baby between us on Wednesday. Postpartum,
Yeah.
I had a baby 5 days ago.
Right.
And the prof said, normally I'd put you in 2 different rooms, but he said, I know she won't let you cheat. So we're both in the same room, and we got the test back the following week. I beat her by like 2 points.
So on the worst mental day of her life, you got her.
Of course. And I get up literally and do victory laps around her. And the prof said, you are a sick individual.
Yeah.
I said, you haven't lived my life, buddy.
It's funny you mentioned going into the program and questioning the reasons for going into the program. Grody Unprofessional is not sponsored by any MBA program.
Oh, sorry.
I'll have to edit this if they ever do. But I also signed up to start my MBA. Gutted through the first class, go to the second class, and I remember them laying out the syllabus, and I just had this thought, like, if I'm going to spend 10 hours a week, I want to learn what I'm interested in learning. It wasn't a lack of interest in learning business. It was, what do I want to focus on in learning business? And I remember thinking to myself, it's a lot cheaper and a lot more convenient if I just stop at Barnes & Noble on the way home and grab a stack of books. And so for me, it was a mindset shift of, I'm going to study business. That wasn't the question, because to your exact point, as an engineer, you come out of school, and I think it's not taught explicitly, but it is definitely implicit in the education, is that great products sell themselves. And any engineer that has spent any amount of time in industry realizes that that's not true. The customer has to be taught. The customer has to be educated. The product has to be manufactured. The product has to be shipped. The product has to be inventoried. The product has to be supported. The product has to be sunset. There's a whole arc beyond just having a great product. And so for me, it's been over my career, the consumption of business books, whether it be from Warren Buffett or whether it be from investor lenses or startup lenses or optimization of big business lenses. I've continued the consumption of business content, but just not through the formal lens.
When you have a degree, unfortunately, people tend to have, quote unquote, more respect.
Sure.
And it's so misguided. I wish we get away from that certificates, I think, are more the wave of the future, as opposed to degrees.
To full-on degrees. Yeah. So as I mentioned at the beginning, you and I have known each other for a lot of years, and one of the things I always enjoy sitting down to chat with you is we think about the product adoption curve, and the earliest group on the product adoption curve is called the early adopter, and that's the group that they're ready to buy as soon as the product exists. I don't know that you personally actually fit on that curve, because you're like before the early adopter. You're ready to buy even before a product exists. And maybe I'll just call you a futurist. I love getting to hear your lens and your view of where products are headed and where technologies are headed. One of the things that your passion has led to is you often invest in startups extremely early in the process. Like even before product in many instances. One example, we'll start with the example that financially turned out really, really well. I remember having lunch with you and you telling me that you had bought stock in a car company in California that was run by a South African, and he was going to transform transportation through the implementation of the electric vehicle. And I remember thinking to myself, there has not been a car company started in the United States successfully since the Dodge brothers, back before World War I. The two Dodge brothers died of the Spanish flu in like the 19-teens, and Steve is convinced that this little company called Tesla is going to break the 100-year trend. What I'm interested most in, as you look at a company, and let's use Tesla to start the example, what was the reason for getting in so early? Was there an event? Was there a gut feel? When you look at a company like Tesla way back when, before the S came out.
Oh, yeah.
So what was it?
It's kind of a convergence of different things. 2007, 8, I was big in Apple. And it was the convergence of technologies. And I couldn't articulate it, but I knew the world was shifting. Mm-hmm. There's something different. In fact, after Jobs showed the iPhone, I actually got in touch with Steve Zamuda at Caterpillar, who was running the cabs, and I showed him the presentation on the iPhone.
Yeah.
And I said, we need to make this bigger and put it in a cab. Could you imagine if now an operator had the ability to see the manuals, or a technician, they wouldn't have to carry out all these books. It could be electronic. He could make phone calls. They can, do all this stuff. And really, I was envisioning what turned out to be the iPad.
The iPad.
I saw the value of putting it in the cab and having direct communication where they could call the dealership. So I was early into Apple at the time, and they'd go up, I'd cash out, and they'd drop, and I'd get back in. And that was one data point. The other data point were my kids. My kids were the hipsters. They were into Pokemon in 2002, the trading cards.
Yeah.
And I just watched my kids nailing different trends.
Okay.
My son had a poster of the Tesla Roadster hanging above his bed. And he said to me, Dad, this company called Tesla, and this is 2010.
Yeah, so this is
way before the IPO.
Yeah.
Said, Dad, it's an electric car. The kid's 9 years old, and he's running through all the different things about it. And as an engineer, I'm sitting there, holy socks. You're good, kid. I was reading through an Apple article in 2012. It mentioned that Tesla was IPOing. And so my broker was a friend of mine. I said, get me some of this Tesla. It would be a much better story if it was 1,000 shares.
Sure.
But it was only 100 shares. And the funny thing is that 100 shares then split 3 for 1, then split 5 for 1. It IPO'd at like 20, went up to 25, dropped back down to 17 about 3 weeks after the IPO. And that's when I bought in. Like I said, it would be a heck of a story if it would have been 1,000 or 10,000 shares.
So, Steve, the big question that every listener has on their mind right now, what is your son playing with today?
He got his chemistry degree up at Madison, and he's playing at a startup up there.
I think we're going to want to keep track of what he's working on.
Yeah, I can't give you any insider information. Sorry.
For those that have read Peter Lynch, that's really Peter Lynch's approach to quote unquote finding the market. He talks about how you go to the grocery store, you go to TikTok, you go to what the kids are playing with, and that's information that can be had months, quarters, years in advance of a industrial investor in New York or an industrial investor in San Francisco. And so it was really the same lens of what are people interested in and what direction do you see that it could head after that?
Right. And it boils down to what is the perfect startup team? The perfect startup team is 3 people.
Okay.
A hipster, a hacker, and a hustler.
Okay.
The hipster is the person on the ground who picks up trends, who understands problem, has design, user interface. The hacker is the techie guy who can throw together anything and make anything happen. And the hustler is the business person.
Yeah.
That is the perfect startup team. No more, no less.
So Apple and Wozniak and Jobs had the hipster, the hustler, and the hacker, meaning Wozniak the hacker and Jobs the other 2. When you looked at Tesla that early, how did you distribute those?
So it's funny. It's so rare that one person can do it all.
Yeah.
Just look at Musk. He is a hipster, he's a hacker, and he's a hustler.
He's a hustler.
It's so rare, and it's his 20-hour-a-day type mentality that allows him to be and to do all 3.
Yeah. When you bought in, you talked about the product specifications, the Instant Torque, the Model S, what it looked like on the poster. Were you buying also into the vision, the mission of transforming transportation into electric? How did you think about the product specs and how the customer would enjoy those versus the mission side of it?
Sure. So the mission is, to me, one of the most important things.
Okay.
If you look at the startups, there's something deeply personal that most founders have. A tragedy in their life. Something happens where they have, why isn't there a blank? And if you look at the technology trends, if you look at how the world was going, we're burning fossil fuels at an ever-increasing rate for energy. If you look at the trends of if we move to electricity, sustainable, photovoltaics, solar/windmills, and so on, we start to see a future where we're not consumptive. We're not digging. We're not having to fight for resources. We're not needing more. We could create abundance. And that's where Peter Diamandis was able to articulate this dis-ease that I was feeling, that the world is changing, and it was changing at such a pace I couldn't put my finger on it, but I saw the iPhone, I saw Tesla, I saw, innovation after innovation just happening more and more frequently.
Yeah.
And I went to something called Abundance 360 with Peter Diamandis. Peter Diamandis did X Prize, shooting the rocket into space and reusing it twice within 2 weeks or whatever. The reusability to get in and out of space. 200 people had a chance to sit down, and he brought in Astro Teller from Google X, and all these amazing people. And I had the ability to sit down as we're talking with these amazing minds. And I came back from that. I was Chicken Little, the sky's falling. They spoke so differently in California. Everything was possible. Here, oh, no, you can't do that because of... And out there, everything was possible. There were no roadblocks. It's how can we help you? Mm-hmm. That's when I came back and started Friday Coffee Talks.
Okay.
I emailed Peter and I said, hey, can I use your material to share with a few friends? And he said, as long as you don't make money with it. And I mean, this guy, really famous author and all this, responded within 10 minutes of my email.
So for those that are listening, describe what a Friday Coffee Talk was.
Sure. So Friday Coffee Talks started when I went to California and went to Abundance 360, and he talked about all these exponential technologies that the world is changing in not a linear way, but an exponential way. Our brains think linearly. If I told you to take 30 linear steps, you'd get to the evergreen tree outside.
Yeah.
If I told you to take 30 exponential steps, you'd go around the world 25 times. And what Peter showed us is that any technology, when you go from a physical product to a digital, take a photo. Once you digitize it, it's really crappy. The digital camera was invented by Steve Sasson at Kodak, ironically, in 1976. It took about 10 or 12 doublings, 20 years, before it hit that knee of the exponential curve. Peter Diamandis described the 6 Ds. Once something is digitized, it grows deceptively. Then it hits that inflection point, it becomes disruptive. Then it dematerializes, so we don't see film anymore. We see digital image. Once it dematerializes, it demonetizes. You can't charge $1 for a digital image. They're microcents. I give my daughter, when she was 3-4, she would take 1,000 pictures a day, and I'd just chimp them and just delete all the ones that weren't good.
The ones that were up your nose.
Exactly, or my back end. But once it dematerializes and demonetizes, it democratizes. I grew up in a family of 7, and my parents had all these photos. My oldest brother had pictures of himself. I'm number 5 of 7. How many photos of just Steve do you think there are? Zippo. Now, with digital image, it doesn't matter who you are. You have your own show.
Right. So the Friday Coffee Talk was about taking that mindset into a large established organization in the Midwest that, as you said, maybe was more dominated by the reasons things can't happen than the possibility that things could happen.
I found 4 people who were excited like I was. We started at Friday at 7 and it was done on WebEx. I purposely started it at 7 before work because I didn't want it related to work. These people were interested and I wanted to share with them. The next week we had 8, and I had enough material for about 8 weeks because you had 8 modules on electrification, sensors, robotics, and the different exponentials. The next week, each one of those had friends. So before I was done with 5 weeks, I had 30 people volunteering to call in. Then it's like, well, shoot, these people missed the first doubling and exponential talk. So I started it over, and then I started to find professionals at Caterpillar who knew about sensors, that were passionate. And they gave the talk, but added a whole bunch more flavor. And within 6 months, we had 150 people calling in, and I had to send them a calendar invite. It was not a corporate thing.
Yeah.
I would not make it a thou shalt.
Right.
If you wanted, you had to send me an email saying, I want to get on.
Yeah.
So this went on like 3 years. We were getting authors, Joe Justice, big into lean manufacturing. We had CEOs of major corporations do talks, on and on, amazing startups. But it wasn't a sales pitch. It was, show me your passion for the technology. What is the technology, and how can we as people ingest it in our lives and maybe put it into Caterpillar?
Yeah.
Over 3 years, I had literally thousands of people. So if I needed an expert in AMUs, it's a guidance sensor, I would put a call out to the community. Any experts out there that can help me with this? I'd have 5 people respond immediately. It was an amazing community.
Yeah. I want to circle back to the startup conversation. We talked about Apple. We talked about Tesla. You've also invested in companies that had a vision. Maybe they did have the hipster and the hustler and the hacker, but they don't exist today. Companies that you invested in early. How would you describe, ex post facto, with hindsight being 2020, are there aspects that could have been known, could have been seen, could have been discerned in these organizations that ultimately don't deliver on what they're aiming for, that you now use as a lesson learned as you apply it to new organizations that you're evaluating?
Yes and no. Yes, I see the weaknesses in their business plan or the market they tried. They didn't pivot in time. But when I invest, I look at the person.
Okay.
And I invest in the person and not the idea. It might be with dollars, it might be with time, and it might be other ways, giving them context to other areas. I find amazing people and I want to support them. My mission in life is to motivate, support, and inspire. I want to inspire people who have the abilities. I want to motivate them to do something with it, and then I want to support them. As my wife says, not every idea is a good idea, and she's right, proven me wrong many times with the multiple failures. But at the end of the day, the person moves on and is better off.
Okay.
They take those lessons learned and become better at what they do. Very rarely does somebody hit a home run on their first time at bat.
Right.
You mentioned it multiple times. Mindset is something nobody can take away from you.
Yeah.
And if you've got the right mindset, and if I see you've got a mindset that I think is just amazing, I will, and expect nothing in return, because I have everything I need. I don't need any more.
Sure. No, that's very helpful. Well, you're not the first person that I've heard say that you're picking the person over picking the existing mission or the existing product, because any startup is going to be changing product. They're going to be changing strategy pretty regularly. And so you need to pick someone that can steer the ship through the craziness of the startup environment. You've mentioned a couple times that you worked at Caterpillar. You worked there for over 26 years, didn't you?
Right at 30 years.
Right at 30 years. You have lived at an intersection that I am fascinated with. It's an intersection that I've lived in multiple times in my career and desire to continue to live in. And I called it the intersection between innovation and rigidity. I think when we were talking before, you talked about the collision between innovation and rigidity. But it is to say, any organization, no matter what organization it is, that has been very successful for a very long period of time, finds itself with the temptation to think linearly, or to think defensively, or to think in a way that says we need to preserve the past and expand it into the future. And there's a lot of authors that have written books about, in certain environments, that works great for a really, really long period of time, until either a disruptive technology emerges, or a disruptive business model emerges, or a disruptive marketing approach emerges. You can pretty much do something uninterrupted for a long time, until by definition someone shows up and starts to interrupt it. And so large organizations have to wrestle with, how do we continue to equip and enable the existing business model to deliver financial results to the shareholder, and to continue to employ lots and lots of people, and invest and consider and take some shots and take some gambles with things that might not work out. That isn't just two different animals that are the same species and are just a little bit different than each other. In fact, it's almost two different species of mindset. Talk to me a little bit first about your role that you had, and then let's just chat about some of the lessons you learned living at that intersection.
Sure. Hindsight's 20/20, and you have to understand who you are and the way you think. And I learned it much too late that I don't like rigid process. I have to improve and make things better and keep changing things. I could do something once, maybe twice, but 3 times I get really bored. And so I didn't understand what a mismatch I was. And it's always fun to work on something and then read the instructions.
Okay.
And then you realize, if I would have done this, it would have been so much easier. Later on in life, I read a great book called Loon Shots, where they talk about how a rigid structured company can coexist in very tight conditions with a entrepreneurial, innovative side. And he talks about ice and water coexisting at atmospheric pressure at 32 degrees. That you have to create an environment such that the water, which is your innovative, your creatives, versus the ice, which is your structured and so on, can coexist. What I found early in my career, and I could give you multiple examples of me changing process, and the antibodies, the tech stewards saying, you can't do that, you can't do it. It's like, well, I did it and the results work. And then if they can't shoot down your methodology or process, they start attacking you personally. They're trying to protect themselves and their fiefdoms. Yeah. They got to where they're at based on their knowledge, and they are going to protect it. And they will try to do whatever they can to keep their standing within the corporation.
Yeah. I love the Loon Shots example. Sashi Bashal.
Yeah.
is who wrote the book. I love that example. And it talks about the environment. So you have to set the temperature and pressure just right so that the environment can have both solid ice as well as liquid water. And if you set it perfectly, you can hit the triple point, and you could actually have all three physical manifestations of water at the exact same time. What it takes is an executive leadership that is willing and able and equipped to have their hand at the thermostat. Because environmental things are happening outside that are adding temperature or adding pressure or reducing temperature. And so as an executive leader, it's about knowing your organization and knowing the environmental impacts on the organization and constantly adjusting the temperature and pressure so that both the rigid players, the ice players, the structured players have an environment that they can thrive, as well as the fluid players, the movable players, the creatives also have an environment that they can thrive. Another analogy that I've experienced is these people aren't different in degree. They're not just degrees of different in their mindset. They're actually different in kind. They're just different mindsets, different approaches. They see the same problem. They view different ways to solve the same problem. What I've experienced, and you touched on this here, those that are of the ice genetic, the frozen genetic, the rigid genetic, they wake up every day looking at the creatives and saying, you're going to destroy this place. And that's not even necessarily at its pure intellectual level. There's an emotional layer that says that if this person comes in and tries to change these manufacturing processes and tries to change our product, and they're going to change our market approach, and we can't sell this, our dealers aren't prepared for that, and this and this. You're trying to destroy this place. And what actually happens is the creatives wake up on that exact same day and they look at the ice, they look at the rigidity, and with the same emotion, they say, you're going to destroy this place. We can't move. We can't have flexibility. We can't have freedom. New technology is emerging. New market competitors are emerging. New business approaches are emerging, and we're stuck in the Stone Age. And the role of the leader, the role of the executive leader in that environment is to look at both of them and say, keep the guns pointed downfield. He's not trying to destroy this company. She's not trying to destroy this company. We need both of you to be you, and we need both of you to stop bickering.
Yeah. The other thing that's really important, and I ran into this, is your rewards are completely different.
Yes.
One is based on if I create, I get a share. The other, if the company is successful, I get profit sharing.
Yeah. What
I found in my career is I would do my job, and it would take about 30% of my time. And I would do what was required, that my boss says, you got to get this, and this done. The other 70%, I was reinventing process. I was doing things that were outside my job scope.
Yeah.
A good example was I found we had Caterpillar people who were there 40, 50 years, just amazing metallurgists who have seen every failure known to man and knows everything. But all the knowledge was in his head. And this is early 90s, and they talked about artificial intelligence back then and codifying that knowledge of the enterprise. I found this one OS2 geek, and he showed me that you could actually make a touchscreen on your computer just by the software. And so what we did was we took a tractor where you touch the undercarriage and up would pop the undercarriage. And then you would touch a track link, and a track link would come up, and it would show you the top 10 failures. And it would give you a story where I would take his memory and I put down. This was way beyond everyone's thought process.
Right.
So when I went into my year-end evaluation, they asked me, okay, did you accomplish this, and this? Yes. I also did this. Well, what were the results? Well, we haven't had any results. We've got to wait until next year where we get the budget and we can actually fill it out. Well, then you just did what you were supposed to.
Right.
Okay, you're an average employee. Next year, that takes its own life and things really start going great and so on. And I put that on there. It's like, well, what did you do? I said, well, the work was done last year and now we're populating. Well, you can't claim what you did last year this year.
Right.
I have more patents and more process innovation, and I am an average employee. Between Six Sigma and documented cost savings, I have literally over $500 million in new products, cost savings, and cost avoidance, and so on.
Steve, I would tell you for an average employee, that's pretty decent.
I just wanted to see somebody who was above average.
Here's what I'll tell you. He doesn't come to Grody and Unprofessional. You won't find him. You won't find him here. You mentioned something really early in this segment that I'm really interested in. You talked about how you discovered that you were a mismatch within an organization or within a mindset. And I would say part of my testimony of my career is the same. I spent probably the first 10 years of my career as a mismatch, as a misfit, and I struggled a lot with that. I struggled a lot because I thought I was broken. I thought it was because I wasn't able to fit in the box, and it led me to some pretty dark places. I thankfully have found my tribe. I found a group that I fit in with. I found a mindset that I fit in with. I read authors that as I'm reading the book, it's like I feel like I've met this person before. How would you help a 22-year-old coming out of college? How would you help coach them to balance finding your tribe, finding your match, but you can't quit when you have one bad day? Like, where's that balance between grit and moving on till you find your tribe?
That is a great question. And after I left Caterpillar, after working with several startups, I taught at Bradley.
Yes.
And I taught an innovation and collaboration course. And I had the great pleasure to work with Heidi Bauman and Dr. I forgot Jennifer's last name. They were more on the business side, and they talked about culture, and they talked about business, and the light bulb went on when they did a cultural assessment. Are you right for the organization? Is your mindset one that you like structure? You like doing things the same way? You like that constant of knowing what you're doing? Or are you more like me that loves ambiguity, loves making it up as I go, loves shooting from the hip, whatever expression you want to call it, and understanding yourself early in your college career?
Yeah.
Because your first job, either you're going to love your profession or you're going to hate your profession.
Yeah.
Either you're going to think you're a mismatch, that you wasted 4 years and then jumped to something completely else, or you're going to say, this is amazing. And I think it boils down to understand your internal motivator and how you think.
Yeah.
If you can understand that, no matter what you do, you can get into a small company, a medium-sized company, or you could get into a large corporation, and so on. If I were to give any advice, it's understand what you like or what type of person you are, and then choose a job and a career not based on money.
Yeah.
Money will come, no doubt about it, but if you show up and you're excited, you're enthusiastic. I used to look at people when they walked into work. You had two types of people. Ones that shoulders were square and they were beating cheeks to get in. And then you have the others who dragged in at the very last second, shoulders rounded, and it was like they're going to the proverbial dentist.
Right. Steve, I'm interested. You mentioned being somewhat of a misfit, being somebody that on the spectrum is more in the fluid, more in the creative. I'm interested if you could tell a story. We'll keep the guilty nameless, but in your career where you had an idea, you had a passion, you had a conviction, and you were essentially told, hey, just get back inside the box. Like, no, we can't be out. We can't be this creative. We can't be pushing the envelope this far.
Where do I begin? Part of the joy is how can I get around that individual that's trying to hold me back? No is the first step to get to a yes. One of the ones that I really enjoyed because it started off with a major problem. Making tires is very expensive. It's a long, time-consuming process. And back in 2010, mining took off. So tires that were going for $30,000 are now going for $300,000.
Wow.
And as a result, they couldn't get enough tires. They couldn't make them fast enough. CAT couldn't sell equipment because these large trucks and large wheel loaders are sold without tires. The mine has to buy the tires, so they were holding off all their purchases. I was the tire and rim product manager at the time, and I spoke at the annual tire association, and I said, you know what, I want tires when I want tires. I want you to build a factory right across the street from me. I want you to roll them over the next day. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to build and all this. And everyone laughed at me.
Okay.
This small little chemical company, two guys came up to me and said, Steve, we can do that. I said, I'm all ears. And they had a concept of a urethane tire.
Okay.
Essentially, you mix part A and part B, you mix them together, and we're talking 1,500 gallons, 2,000 gallons.
Yeah, these tires are 15 feet tall.
13 feet tall, 4 feet wide.
Yeah. They don't have these at Sam's Club.
No, they don't. Or Tire Rack. I checked Tire Rack. They weren't there. After talking with them, what took Michelin 5 years to design a tire, $1 billion to go greenfield site to build one of these large wheel loader truck tires, I said I could do it in 1 year and $10 million. Needless to say, the antibody said, this guy is off his rockers. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And as a result, my performance evaluation that year, he makes wild claims. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, I found a vice president that was willing to support me. Gave me the $10 million. We designed a tire based on a 10-inch diameter on a dyno wheel that we scaled up to 13 feet. We designed a urethane factory that's never been done before. Made a mold, a 13-foot diameter, 4-foot high out of aluminum, all within 6 months. We cleared a warehouse, designed, procured, and got it out onto the mine site by Thanksgiving.
Wow.
After we poured the first tire, had everything going, I was called into my boss's office. This was on a Thursday because he was going on vacation on Friday. At the time, there were 6 of us out in a cinder block building in the middle of the factory, all by ourselves, making stuff up as we go. I thought I was going to be promoted. He said to me, Steve, you are totally incompetent. You can't tell me when things are going to get done. You can't give me a project plan. I said, you can't schedule innovation. You can't schedule invention. It's going to happen. We will get done. We know we've got to get this done, and we will get it done. This person was a manager and not a leader.
Yeah.
He wanted to manage me to the nth degree.
Right.
And I was described my first year as a 500 horsepower go-kart. If you could just control where it went. It was the way I was described. And he replaced me and basically said, I've got another job for you. And I said, well, what if I don't want it? He said, well, you don't have a job here at Caterpillar. But once again, it's not what happens. It's your reaction to what happens. Because I used that as a springboard to then get innovation to be intentional, whereas before all innovation at CAT was unintentional and kind of off the books. We created something, how you have Skunk Works?
Yep.
We did Badger Works.
Okay.
Do you remember the video, The Nasty Honey Badger?
Oh, yeah.
He doesn't give a crap about anything. He's tenacious and he goes. So we created Badger Works and created a Center for Innovation Disruptive Technologies. Once again, I used that situation of the tire to springboard me into something even better.
To fail forward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And pretty much my whole career has been one mess into another. Hey, this is great.
It's interesting that those organizations, not just Caterpillar, but any organization, is tempted in their later phases in life when they're made multinational, global, Dow 30, they're tempted into this mindset that if something can't be measured, it doesn't exist. From the accounting lens, from the manufacturing lens, and I'm willing to cede. I don't know enough about accounting. I'm willing to cede the point that in accounting, if it can't be measured, it doesn't exist. But they then extend it into innovation. They extend it into creation. And exactly what you had happen is metrics can't measure some of this stuff. Right. Metrics are built on a presupposition that they're predictable. In October of this year, you need to tell me what you're going to be doing next December, 15 months from now. Well, what do? You pick something that's linear. Mm-hmm. You pick something that 30 steps equals 3 feet times 30, 90 feet. I'm going to go 90 feet. I don't know in an exponential realm if the next 3 steps are going to be 3 inches or if they're going to be 300 miles. But what happens is by governing the organization through metrics, you then ultimately govern your employees to be predictable. And the way to be predictable is oftentimes to set your expectations somewhat low. And what you're saying is to say, man, I can't predict it. What I can do is I can demonstrate effort. I can demonstrate intentionality. I can demonstrate directionality, but you got to give me some degrees of freedom on the when we get there. And large, rigid, structured organizations that are hoping to have monolithic processes as it comes to people evaluation just don't have room for that. Steve, you're retired by and large. How would you describe your mission and your passion for this season of life?
It's to inspire, to tell people we are going to see more change within the next 10 years than the preceding 100. Most people, 99.9% of the people think linearly, and they project linearly. My mission is to try to talk to as many people as I can to say, no, we are going to see tremendous change. And either A, you create the change by understanding what are these disruptive technologies and how to leverage it. And I did that teaching at Bradley. Or B, understanding the principles and find companies to invest in and early in their lives such that you can do a early stage Amazon, an early stage Google, an early stage Tesla and get 25,000x your initial investment. So I want to inspire people. Mm-hmm. I want to motivate people to actually do something and give them ideas on what to do. And then when they do something, be there to support them, either physically to help them out, emotionally to pick up the broken pieces when they fail or learn. It's not failing, it's learning, or financially. Time, talents, and treasures.
Yeah.
That is my mission right now: inspire, motivate, and support.
Yeah.
And I especially want to work with the young people, because it's these young people that do amazing stuff. It's the young people that are going to disrupt all these large industries.
Sure. Steve, I can tell you firsthand that you have been a big part of inspiring and motivating and supporting me. We've known each other for a number of years, gone through career transition in my part, sabbatical, starting at a new company, and you've been a big help of being an encouragement in those transitions. And so for that, I'm very thankful. And I'm also thankful for the time we can sit down and talk about the lessons that you've picked up across your career and learning about yourself and learning about organizations and innovation. It's inspiring to me to hear the lessons that you've picked up over the years.
Well, I'll tell you, it's been an absolute pleasure. I just value our friendship. I value our monthly get-togethers to talk about innovation, talk about problems, how might we work together to solve other people's problems. I think that's the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for stopping by, Steve.
My pleasure. Thank you.
For those that wish to share praise, feedback, accolades, or large sums of money, you can reach me at justin@grody.io. For those with complaints, concerns, frustrations, or accusations, or if you believe I'm an infernal skunk, you can heliograph me at my home in Winchesterton, Fieldville, Iowa. Just ask for Crazy Eyes. Thanks for your time. Let's do this again soon.